There was a time, and it's not even that long ago, where the average person could afford to live in London. If you were born in London, you could live in London. Somebody who did a humble job like a milkman or a nurse or a junior doctor could look forward to putting down a deposit or lack thereof for a mortgage and getting a property. It was possible. And many of the people who are sitting on £500,000 houses or more today are those very people who benefited from this system. And now they've pulled the ladder out from beneath themselves, making sure that no one else can join the club. Let the Hunger Games begin. There have been some big winners in this game of property. The landlords, the hoarders, the first adopters, those people in the 90s who sat down and picked up a mortgage and actually repaid it despite the financial crashes. And I'm not saying it was easy, and I'm not saying they don't deserve their wealth and success. What I am saying is somebody's got to foot the bill, and the people footing the bill are average Joes who aren't old enough to have bought properties during these boom times, and sadly cannot even get a mortgage because they will never be able to save up a deposit to get one. It's always good to remember whenever somebody's winning, somebody is losing. So if you see a massive appreciation in the value of a property, somebody's been paying the price for that. And usually the people paying the price are the people who need it the most. It's important to note that a lot of these property pricing issues are not just London centric. The entire UK has issues around house prices. Big cities such as Birmingham, Manchester are not unaffected. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some of the property prices within London and some of the other major cities in the UK and see exactly what the hell is going on, because it's spicy. Let's have a look at where in London somebody would want to live. This is just for illustration purposes. Any of the boroughs that are adjacent to the River Thames, and especially the City of London, out of the question. Let's just say that's a very luxurious place to live, not allowed to live there. I'd say a reasonable location for somebody to live in London would be somewhere around this belt, which is kind of one step away from central London. So somewhere reasonable would be somewhere like Barking, somewhere like Croydon, and you probably heard of Croydon, and you probably ain't heard good things. Somewhere else, even like Haringey, which is where Tottenham City Football Club resides. Let's go even further out. Let's say, forget that second band. Let's say you're somebody on a budget, you want to live in Enfield, Hillingdon, Havering, somewhere really far out. Let's say you want to live in Enfield. Let's see what we can get. So my compatriots, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm not cherry picking here. I've gone into Zoopla, which is one of the main places people look for housing, rental, purchasable housing in the UK. And Zoopla is one of the main providers. There's another one called Rightmove. There's more than that. There's various places, but I'm just picking Zoopla just for the sake of it. Let's look at what we can get in Enfield. I'm just going to type in Enfield for sale. OP spelling. Well, London Borough of Enfield for sale. Let's see what's available. Don't worry, I'll filter this out. There are some very fancy places in Enfield as well. There's kind of this paradox where sometimes the suburbs of London are even more expensive than the more inner city areas because there's larger properties. Let's say you want a 2-bedroom property and you don't care what it is. You'll live in a box as long as it's got 2 bedrooms. And yeah, let's see what the situation is and let's see what's available. Okay, so you have some selections here. And look, you've got 500k, you've got a 290k property. Now, this doesn't look that bad. Let's click on it. Let's see what the situation is. You get a share of the freehold, which is interesting. It's a converted flat. Now, to me, this doesn't seem... There's some catch here. You're not getting this for that price. Don't know what's going on here. But floor plan wise, you know, you've got 55 meters squared. It doesn't look too bad. This actually seems pretty decent. But again, is this representative? Is this really what you're going to be getting? I don't know. This seems very cheap actually. But that's 290k. That's not something which the average person could just go in and buy. One bed flat. Where was that place? So this is in Edmonton Green, N9. The one bed flat. Let's see what the situation is here. It's leasehold. So it's got a ground rent. The lease ends in 2085, so it's quite a short lease. What's the floor plan? 45 square meters. So again, this is somebody who's converted a house. So now we've got a criteria. This is a 2-bed flat or a 2-bed terraced house. So this is £485,000 for a 2-bed house. And let's see how far out of London it is. So this is not too bad actually. It's Ponders End. So it's not too far from central London, to be honest. It's like half an hour on the tube or whatever, or maybe half an hour on a bus. Let's look at the entire floor plan. You've got a total square footage of 90 meters squared. It's not too bad, but again, what you're paying for this is £490,000. You know, whoever bought this made an absolute killing. They bought it in 1995 for £72,000. Probably some renovations occurred, and now they're selling it for £485,000. You know, if we're doing a simple maths equation, that's a massive multiplier. So yeah, somebody's really caking it. Yeah, so let's think about exactly the situation we're in. That property costs £485,000. Let's say it's listed above market. Let's say realistically, let's say by some miracle you get it for £420. Like, you know, no memes here. Let's say £420, 420. Let's say you get it for that price. You know, you're doing well. You got a really cracking deal. You haggled them down to a much more reasonable price. So what sort of situation are we in terms of what level of income do we need to actually purchase that property? If you're buying a property that's worth this much money, at a minimum, you need an income to get a mortgage, that is. If you're buying it for cash, you shouldn't be watching this, man. Go sit in your yacht. Yeah, I mean, don't even watch this. Go to your yacht and enjoy your life. No hate. I'm happy for you. Do your thing. But look here. Let's do some quick maths. So we have 420. You need to divide this by 4.5. At a minimum, you need this level of joint income, which, you know, that's 93,000, blah blah blah. You divide that by 2. Let's say you and your missus, your wife, your boyfriend, whatever you adhere to, whatever your partner is in crime, you and that person are purchasing this together, because that's not impossible, you know. Let's say you're doing that. So we're going to get this number and we're going to divide this by 2. So you each need to have a salary of around 47 grand. Okay, 47 grand. Okay, so you guys are making 47 grand a year each. Okay, just on my personal estimates, the take home for that is around somewhere around the mark of 2,800 per month. So that's your take home. Your take home is, and that's like after taxes, what you actually take home for that sort of salary. You're taking home 2,800 a month. Okay, now that's your take home. So your joint combined take home is, you know, around this amount here. Okay, not a bad amount. 5.6 grand a month you take home together as a couple. Now let's figure out exactly what the situation is for this mortgage. First and foremost, you need a £42,000 deposit. So you would have needed to save £42,000. Not impossible, but you need to have saved that. And that's the minimum you can even attempt to purchase this property with. On top of that, what you'd also need is you need to make the mortgage repayments. Now let's figure out exactly what the mortgage repayments would be for a property like this. Okay, now we're on the Google mortgage repayment calculator, and let's look at how much we're borrowing. So if you put a deposit down of around 40 to 42 grand and you got the property for 420k, you're borrowing somewhere in the region of 380,000. Let's say, you top up the deposit a little bit with whatever reason, you're only borrowing this much. Let's say the interest rates right now are 5.2%. You can probably get a mortgage for around 5.2% right now. You need to drop about 2.2k a month to service that mortgage. So if we go back to the original actual asking price for that house, this is a 2 bedroom house. It's not perfect, and you know if we're looking at 485,000, let's say you put that you actually borrow the full amount, which is not impossible in London, massive demand. You're going to need to be paying around 2.5k a month as a couple. You know, if you're both, to even get approved a mortgage for that sort of property, you need to have a salary of around 55k each, which is quite rare. It's not impossible, but it's rare. So, realistically, if you're under the age of 30, even if under the age of 40, you need to be in, the top echelon of earners. If we're looking at statistics around salaries, realistically, if you're making 55,000 pounds a year, you're in the top 80th percentile at the age of 30, and probably more like the top 90th percentile at the age of below 30. So realistically, only a small subset of people in London can ever hope to buy. And that purchasing is, I'm not saying you're buying outright, you're taking up a massive mortgage, you're leveraging a lot of debt to purchase this sort of property. And if anything happens, such as you lose your job, you get ill, obviously there are insurances and stuff like that, or one of your partner decides to have a baby and her earnings get massively cut and she decides not to go back to work, you probably couldn't service the mortgage debt repayments on your own, even in that sort of privileged position, where you're doing better than most people. You are like the high flyers of, earnings. So realistically, you could buy, but you need to be the creme de la creme. And on top of that, it will be an uneasy experience. You'll be spending around 40% of each of your salaries to cover the mortgage costs. If I go back to the Excel spreadsheet here, you're making 6.2k a month after tax combined, and the mortgage repayments are in the region of 2.5k a month. So realistically, that puts you in a position of paying around 3.7k a month. Actually left over £700 of that will easily go on things like electricity bills, other sort of costs, insurances, etc. So it's not a terrible life, but to even get to the point where you're approved for this sort of mortgage, you need a massive hefty income to allow that to occur. So yeah, there's that. So what's the big deal? Why am I saying you'll never buy a property in the UK? Well, this video is specifically about London, but the problem extends further than that. It extends all across the UK, because London is sort of the breeding ground for basically what happens everywhere in the UK. Obviously, it's an extreme place, but again, it's a case study for the future of the country. Now, I used to be a teacher, which is a public sector job, and the pay was sad. I'm not going to go into any more details, but I left that role primarily because I didn't see any career progression, and there's strikes all across the UK right now in December 2022, and I do not blame people one bit. Based on these house prices, the average person in London who's a teacher, a nurse, even lower level doctors, you're probably never going to be able to buy a property unless you get some massive financial support. And if you're a doctor and your wife's a nurse, you probably might still struggle unless you work some magic. It's a very difficult position to be in for literally anyone in the public sector, but not just the public sector. Anyone who's in low skilled roles within the private sector or not in a managerial or senior role, you'll find very few people in the McDonald's lineup who make £50,000 a year. Very few people who work for, you know, your local corner shop who make £50,000 a year. Or your kebab man makes way less than that. The standard of living he's under is he's sharing a room in a house and shares a bathroom and shares a kitchen and only does his work and sleep, basically. So it's quite dystopian, and it's getting worse, and the gap between those who jump on the property ladder and those who are being left behind is getting bigger and bigger every day. And right now it's only the top 25% who can afford in London, but realistically that will probably change the top 10%, maybe one day the top 5%, just based on income. So unless you're inheriting something nice, you're being left behind, and that is what is scary.